Welcome to Spooky History. In today's episode, we're entering the world of Ed and Lorraine Warren and the true story behind The Conjuring 3. On February the 16th, 1981, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson called in sick to his job at Right Tree Service and joined his partner David Glatzel at the kennel where she worked. Bono, the couple's landlord and Debbie's employer, not the singer from U2, when he takes a break from still not finding what he's looking for, offered to buy lunch for them. Afterwards, an intoxicated Bono grabbed Mary and refused to let her go. Johnson's sister Wanda claimed she heard her brother growling like an animal and then a shiny flash in the air. Johnson had brought out a 5-inch pocket knife. He stabbed Bono repeatedly, leaving him with 4 or 5 tremendous wounds. These were mostly to his chest, and one that stretched from his stomach to the base of his heart. Bono was dead within a few hours. Johnson was discovered 2 miles from the site of the murder, having apparently walked in a trance-like state straight into the woods. He had no memory of the murder and was taken to the Bridgeport Correctional Center, where he was held on a bail of $125,000. This was the first murder in the 193-year history of Brookfield, Connecticut, but it was also notable for another reason. The day after the murder, Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigator, informed the Brookfield police that she believed Johnson wasn't responsible for his actions as he had been possessed when the crime was committed. The trial of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, also known as the Devil Made Me Do It case or the Demon Murder Trial. This became the first known court case in the United States in which the defense sought to provide evidence of innocence based upon the defendant's claim of demonic possession, thus negating any personal responsibility for the crime. That's fortunate. The courts have dealt with the existence of God, Johnson's attorney Martin Minnella said at the time. Now they're going to have to deal with the existence of the devil. Johnson's supposed possession was a consequence of a failed exorcism he had taken part in a few months previously. His girlfriend, Debbie's parents, the Glatzels, had recently started renting a property which they had just begun cleaning it up when the paranormal activity began. Sorry, I mean when The Conjuring 3 began. No, that doesn't work either. The film, it starts later. Debbie's 11-year-old brother, David, said he had visions of an old man who would push and terrify him, sometimes appearing as a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features, and jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. Muttering in Latin, threatening to harm his family and steal his soul. David started to exhibit strange behaviour, growling, hissing, speaking in otherworldly voices, and reciting passages from the Bible or Paradise Lost. Demons read and memorise a lot of poetry. I know a lot of religious people who haven't even read the Bible. Meanwhile, demons are over here reciting it word for word just for fun. David also had unexplained scratches and bruises and suffered through spasms and convulsions. The encounters with the old man were becoming increasingly violent. Each night, a family member would have to remain awake with David as he suffered through spasms and convulsions, waking up in the middle of the night, crying hysterically. During episodes, he appeared to exhibit special abilities, including levitation and precognition. It was to help out with these shifts that Debbie asked her boyfriend to move in. David's visions worsened until they began occurring in the daytime as well. Although the family had allegedly not witnessed anything worse than strange noises coming from the attic, at this point they were forced to admit all this probably wasn't just an excuse to avoid cleaning the house. David had gained 60 pounds, and Debbie and her mother later said they saw him being beaten and choked by invisible hands, and that red marks had appeared on his neck afterwards. The Glatzels asked a priest from a local church to bless the house, but it didn't help. So, 12 days after the original incident, when the Catholic Church refused to perform an exorcism, the family called in the Warrens. During their first conversation, Lorraine allegedly witnessed a black mist materializing next to David, an apparent indication of a malevolent presence. Bet it was a nun. Ed Warren later testified that the David Glatzel was possessed by 43 demons. So David was subjected to 3 lesser exorcisms. Whilst Father Nicholas Greco of the Diocese of Bridgeport denied any exorcism was performed, the Warrens reported the process took several days. Lorraine later asserted that David levitated, ceased breathing for a minute, and even demonstrated precognition. He even specifically predicted the murder of Johnson that would later be committed, which I guess technically makes his family and the Warrens accomplices of the demon, though the Warrens did contact Brookfield Police in October to warn them that the situation was becoming dangerous. Johnson attempted to coerce one of the demons out of David during one of the exorcisms, saying, "Take me on, leave my little buddy alone." This was a fatal error. Rookie mistake. At this point, the family reportedly saw the demon transfer itself to Johnson, though he himself claimed this happened several days after the exorcism, after he was attacked in his car by the demon and went back to the Glatzels' rented property to examine an old well that supposedly housed a demon. Of course. Looking into the well, he apparently made eye contact with it and became possessed. Either way, Johnson started to exhibit behaviour that was strikingly similar to David's, causing Debbie to fear that he had become possessed as well. According to Debbie, Cheyenne would go into a trance. He would growl and say he saw the beast. Later, he would have no memory of it. It was just like David. The Warrens' claims to the police after the murder several months later sparked a media frenzy, fueled in part by the Warrens, whose agents promised that lectures, a book, and even a film detailing the gruesome cases. Johnson's lawyer, Martin Manella, didn't have an interest in the supernatural, but believed Johnson was possessed due to the deep wounds in Bono's body that could not have been made by a human. After all, only a demon can use a knife to stab someone, am I right? Manella attempted to submit a plea of not guilty during the trial, citing 2 British court cases permitting a defence based on demonic possession. He'd travelled to England to meet the lawyers who had been involved in these cases, planned to fly in exorcism specialists from Europe, and threatened to subpoena the priests who oversaw David Glatzel's exorcism if they did not cooperate with the defence. You'd think lawyer relying on his ability to prove the existence of the supernatural would be a pretty ridiculous thing to do. Unless, of course, you've seen our episode on the Ghostbusters court case, in which case you'd be right, though in this case you'd be wrong. Judge Robert Callahan ruled against the defence, arguing the claim could not be objectively proven by evidence, and it was thus irrelative and unscientific to allow such testimony. Johnson changed his plea to self-defence, and all the surrounding media attention vanished. The trial took place in Connecticut Superior Court in Danbury, beginning on October 28, 1981, and after 15 hours of deliberations over 3 days, the jury found Johnson guilty of first-degree manslaughter. He received a sentence of 10 to 20 years, but served only 5 for good behaviour, and after his release, Johnson and Debbie Glatzel got married. Oh, a happy ending. In the meantime, in 1983, Lorraine Warren had published the much-publicised book The Devil in Connecticut, written with Gerald Brittle. Reportedly, the Glatzels received $2,000 from the publishers for it, but when the book was reissued in 2006, Debbie's brother Carl sued for damages. He called the possession a hoax engineered by the Warrens, who concocted a phony story about demons in an attempt to get rich and famous at our expense, and inflicted intentional affliction of emotional distress. Glatzel's father, Carl Glatzel Sr., also denied telling Brittle that his son had been possessed. The boy, David, who continued to have episodes, though to a lesser degree after the possession, had been supposedly transferred to Johnson, has himself apparently never claimed that he thought he was possessed. All these accusations were vehemently denied by Lorraine Warren and Gerald Brittle, who claimed that he possesses video of over 100 hours of interviews with the family and that they signed off on the book as accurate before it went to print. Johnson and Debbie seemingly agreed with the Warrens' version of the events, though ironically this is one of the few cases where saying that probably helps them sleep at night. Though The Conjuring 3 isn't based on this book or Johnson's testimony, it definitely tells the Warrens' version of the story, with the director saying, "Ultimately, this is a Conjuring film. The story of the Warrens and their experience and their journey. When I was looking at this, I have struggled to decide what I believe, what actually happened, but what I decided is my belief needs to take a back seat to their story, and ultimately, it's the story of their faith and the faith they put in each other. Or the stories of the crap they spun." Although he shared misgivings about sensationalizing the murder of a real person, who is renamed Bruno Sauls in the film, this didn't stop the creative team adding a nemesis for Lorraine Warren, something all true stories have, in the guise of the occultist played by Eugenie Bouderon. What happens when Lorraine meets her match? What happens when she meets someone who is just as powerful and talented as her? An anti-Lorraine, so like a truth teller? So she has to face that. We play with a lot of mirrors in the movie. Lorraine has the anti-Lorraine, that dark devil there. Adding in an entirely new villain is nothing new to a Conjuring film, true story or not. As we mentioned in our Amityville episode, The Conjuring 2, The Enfield Case, added an entirely fabricated demonic nun called Valak, who was not reported as involved by anyone, even those who came up with a new story every few years. In fact, Valak was entirely added during reshoots for the film, which, I mean, a film based on a true story, adding an entirely new antagonist after you've finished filming it might not be the best sign of accuracy. Though I have heard the English weren't in the initial cut of Braveheart, and that film is flawlessly historical. To be fair, some old Christian texts do talk about a demon entity called Valak and linked to serpents, though whether that makes the demon historical is up for debate. And even in those texts, it doesn't dress up as a nun, but as an angelically winged boy riding a two-headed dragon. None of this stopped the nun getting its own film in 2018, set a Romanian convent. And, well, it is true that Romania exists, and that there are some convents there, and now look, I've accidentally covered all the historical aspects of the Nun film. In my defence, it's so easy to do, there's just so few. I can't tell you the number of times my partner's woken me up in the middle of the night saying, "Stop it, you were covering the historical basis of the Nun film in your sleep again." Going back to The Conjuring 3. The film also ramps up a heart attack that the real-life Ed had at some point in the decade, ascribing its cause to the demon and Arnie's challenge to it as an attempt to save Ed's life. Ed notes to Lorraine in the film that he can't remember one quite like this, a statement he has managed to make more or less verbatim in each of the 3 films he has starred in. Of course, one can still hope that if a finished film doesn't follow its trailer's attempts to keep upping the ante, or shy away from the courtroom questions of faith and fact. However, based on previous films in the series, it seems unlikely we'll get anything as ambitious as The Exorcism of Emily Rose, itself a not entirely faithful story, but a great one, you should totally check it out. But hey, telling the true story is what we're here for. Still, let us know what you thought of the film in the comments, and if you'd like a more in-depth reaction to it when we do get to see it. I will let one of my writers watch it, because I am not submitting myself to that. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Spooky History. You can find us on most social media at Spooky His Show, and you can support us with donations at paypal.me/noisyghostend. If you have a suggestion for future episodes, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and please do have nightmares. Goodbye.